So the other pressure point that that PHP has as far as security, and one of the things that have introduced, even for very good programmers, introduced some problems are the extensions. As I touched on before, there's a lot of C libraries out there, mostly C libraries, that PHP will wrap or bind to or link to, and there's certain areas that can go wrong in that respect. Sometimes the actual person who wrote the extension makes a mistake. That happens. Extensions have been previously have been very loose. Now let's say hopefully that they're getting better, and there's a little bit more certification, shall we, of the interface between PHP and the external C library or whatever library it may be. A lot of times the actual library will have faults itself. These libraries are very open source libraries. They oftentimes are not geared to running in large production environments. It's somebody who felt like writing a library for image manipulation or graphing or whatever the case might be, and somebody will spot a problem in that particular library and use it to break your site, whereas with PHP being only the conduit by which they've done that. Similarly, a lot of these libraries, again, aren't used to working in a web environment. Maybe they're used to working on the command line. Maybe they're used to working on the desktop, as we looked at before. So there's a lot of dependencies, a lot of external factors. And at the end of the day, it goes back to the programmer. Know what extensions you're using, know how you're going to use them, and try to keep things minimal. Don't enable every possible extension because you think you might use it in a big production site. Use things as you need to, and don't take the default install for granted. So we get to the third one, which is the PHP core. This is what I consider PHP proper. I did a quick scan of the security libraries, and what was surprising is that for all of the wrap that PHP gets, it's right in line with most other languages. And in fact, often if we did a further analysis, I would get the feeling that it would be, especially recently, better than some other languages. Again, the issue is always the code, not the underlying language. So to keep it fair and to keep things apples to apples, if we compared a lot of PHP frameworks, that number would shoot up. If we compared a lot of .NET frameworks, a lot of Ruby frameworks, a lot of Java frameworks, those numbers would also shoot up. Yes?
I think with the onset of Ruby on Rails, you're going to see that number go up even more because of the widely this is going to be used. And I think you're dead on. I think that number for PHP is going to start dropping even more. Java will always be up there.
Well, and you know, I reiterate this bottom point, right? It's I liken it to, you know, why is there so many security vulnerabilities in Windows? And please, no eggs or anything, but I mean, let's face it, it's the biggest target. It's people want to break the thing that is the most visible, and when you have so many sites out there running PHP, it is largely one of the most visible languages on the web, and arguably the most. So you know. Perfect point. And you know, the more visibility, the more people want to show themselves. You know, Mr. Hacker Kid wants to move up in the ranks in his little gang. The more these different widely used languages will get fallen. And you know, PHP is getting better. Again, remembering that there have been mistakes, but we've so far got one advisory according to Secunia about PHP's core in 2008. Now, granted, you look at all the frameworks and the galleries, and that number is going upwards in the national debt, but it's two different things, and I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Okay, so we've hopefully identified some of the problems, identified the areas that you need to look in. Number one, your code. Don't be a bad programmer. Number two, your dependencies. What extensions you're using, what external data sources you're using, what external functionality that you're using, and then obviously always keep an eye on PHP itself. People make mistakes, and things will always change, and that's part of the ball game. But given all of that, this is focusing more on number one, how do you do some of these things to mitigate the risks of the other other 2 points? So going back to the Bjorn's kind of mantra, it's good to do best practices and to have a methodology. PHP, again, it can be thrown up. It will run on a server under somebody's desk for 2 years until it gets to the point where somebody decides to break it somehow. And then it's like, oh, PHP is insecure. Well, it's ran for 2 or 3 years without any maintenance. I wouldn't say it's too bad. So, institute the common practices that any large or even small company should do about deployment, testing. Oh, there we go. Taking backups normally on a regular basis. It's important to take backups at work. PHP has grown up very quickly, just like Linux and some of the other open source projects have grown up very quickly and moved into larger and larger and larger environments that may not have some of the technical kind of hands-onness that like a Facebook does or a Yahoo does. So, any good practices that you do on for other technologies, institute it for PHP as well. Web security is really about data, and we're going to take a deeper look into this as well. But data drives web applications and thus their security. Days are kind of gone where it was more of like, well, can I find a buffer overflow here? That's less of a concern on a day-to-day basis. And people who know that and do that don't give presentations about it because that's their secret sauce. That's what they do. They're the elite ones, right? Or elite ones, if you'd like. So data is king. And there are some other best practices. Before you're up and running, you want to make sure that you have a good base, a good foundation. When you install something, when you install anything, including backup software on your laptop, you want to make sure that you configure it and not use the default configuration. PHP is no different. One of the shames that I've seen with PHP is that a lot of the RPMs or the packages that come from the operating system are not really that great, and they're not maintained by people who do this type of thing on a daily basis. So just doing yum install PHP, you're probably not going to get exactly what you should have from a security standpoint. The same goes for some of the other projects that do this auto install. They're great for development as long as you have a protected environment, but a lot of these things are not ready for production. And unfortunately, this propagates. It's so easy to use. I'll just throw it up. It looks like it's working, and I'll walk away from it. And you've just opened up 10,000 credit card numbers unwillingly. So be on your toes. And then of course the duo there, MySQL and Apache, which is most common with PHP, is also important to handle in the exact same way. Once you've installed it manually by source and you know exactly which extensions you're using and you know exactly how your system is configured and you've done it meticulously and minimally, you have to configure it. And so there's the famous PHP INI.